Mom, you slept with my boyfriend when I was 20 years old. A man young enough to be your son. And you watched me cry over him for weeks. While you held me in your arms and told me, men are all the same and everything will be okay, all while knowing you were the reason my world had collapsed. I whispered these words to myself as the video played on Jason's phone for the 4th time. My mother's face in crystal clear 4K, looking directly into the camera, smiling as she unbuttoned her blouse. The timestamp? 3 days ago. My childhood teddy bear, visible on the dresser behind them. I scrolled through their texts. If you stop seeing me, I'll tell everyone your business hired illegal workers. I'll tell my daughter everything. She'll hate you, but she'll still take me back. I'm her mother. Her blackmail glowed on the screen. My hands stopped trembling. The initial shock gave way to an icy clarity I'd never felt before. This wasn't just about Jason. This was the same woman who spent my college fund on cosmetic surgery. The same woman who abandoned our dog on a dark highway when she grew tired of him. The woman who let my stepfather molest me and pretended not to notice. I methodically forwarded every video, every text, every photo to my secure email. Evidence, ammunition. Then I wiped all traces of my digital footprint from his phone and placed it exactly where I'd found it. Jason would be home in 30 minutes. He'd never suspect I knew. For years, I thought keeping quiet was survival. But as I walked out of our apartment for the last time, I realized silence wasn't protection. It was permission. They thought their secret was safe. But I didn't just find their affair, I found everything. And I was about to burn it all down. My name is Eliza. I'm 28 now. 8 years have passed since that day I discovered the videos, but some wounds don't heal with time. Especially when the person who inflicted them is supposed to be your protector. Growing up, I was always the good girl. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, the kind of daughter other parents wish they had. I wanted to be a lawyer someday, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. I used to think that desire came from watching crime shows. Now I know it came from living in my own home. My father David was kind but absent for most of my childhood. I believed my mother's story that he abandoned us, that he resented paying child support, that he started a new family and forgot about me. I'd cry myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough for him to stay. Your father never wanted children, she would say, stroking my hair. I fought for you, I'm all you have. It wasn't until years later that I discovered the truth. My mother, Caroline, was beautiful in that way that turns heads. Blonde hair always perfectly styled, manicured nails, designer clothes she couldn't afford. But beauty was her currency. And her weapon. What neighbors and teachers saw was a devoted single mother struggling to raise a daughter alone. What I saw behind closed doors was a woman who brought home different men weekly, who popped pills with her morning coffee, who screamed at me if I interrupted her when a friend was over. When I was 9, she married Richard. My stepfather seemed nice at first, bringing me books and helping with homework, until he started coming into my room at night when I was in 5th grade. I told my mother something felt wrong, that I didn't want to be alone with him anymore. Don't be dramatic, Eliza, she said, not looking up from her magazine. He pays the bills around here. I learned to lock my bedroom door and push my desk against it. Richard left after 2 years, but the damage was done. My mother acted as if he never existed, and I learned that my feelings didn't matter in our house. When I was 14, my mother deliberately had me repeat a grade. I was confused, my grades were perfect. Later, I overheard her on the phone. If she graduates later, David has to pay support longer. It's an extra year of checks. I had a beautiful golden retriever named Max, given to me by my father before the divorce. One day, I came home from school and Max was gone. We couldn't afford to feed him anymore, my mother said, checking her reflection in the mirror. Weeks later, a neighbor told me they'd seen my mother driving Max to the highway at midnight. I cried for days. She bought herself new shoes that weekend. When I was 17, I saw a letter from my dad in the mail. I hid it and read it in the bathroom. It was filled with love, explanations, and a phone number. It was also clearly not the first letter he'd sent. I realized then that my mother had been intercepting his letters for years. I began to see the pattern, how she isolated me, controlled the narrative, and used me as a pawn for financial gain. My entire childhood was built on carefully constructed lies. Senior year, I got a full scholarship to Columbia. My mother announced we were going on a girls' trip to celebrate. When we returned, she had a fresh facelift and my college fund was empty. "You have the scholarship," she shrugged. "I needed this for my career." Her career was finding wealthy men to fund her lifestyle. At 20, I met Jason. He was 29, owned a small construction company, and looked at me like I was his whole world. My mother suddenly wanted to bond with me, to get to know the man who stole her daughter's heart. I was too blind to see the red flags. How she touched his arm when she laughed, how often she invited him over when I wasn't home, how she always managed to be wearing something revealing when he was around. I trusted them both. That was my first mistake. But it wouldn't be my last. 8 months into my relationship with Jason, things began to change. Small shifts at first, a canceled date here, a missed call there. Jason's construction business was taking off, requiring more of his time. I believed him. I was always quick to believe. My mother, meanwhile, took a sudden interest in real estate. She was considering investment properties and needed Jason's expertise. She'd call him directly instead of going through me, arranging meetings to discuss opportunities. "Don't be so possessive, Eliza," she said when I questioned it. "It's unattractive. Jason and I are just talking business." I nodded, swallowing my suspicions along with my pride, but doubt had planted its seed. One evening I arrived early at Jason's apartment to surprise him with dinner. He wasn't home, but his schedule book was open on the counter. There, in his neat handwriting, 3:30 p.m. meet Caroline at Westlake Hotel. Caroline, my mother, at a hotel. Not a real estate office. I told myself it was innocent. People met at hotel lobbies for business all the time. Still, I began paying attention, collecting inconsistencies, like breadcrumbs. My mother buying new lingerie. Jason smelling like her perfume. The way they'd stop talking when I entered a room. How she'd casually mention details about his day that I hadn't told her. "Jason was telling me about that difficult client in Oakwood," she'd say. Then catch herself. "Oh, you must have mentioned it." But I hadn't. The night I found the videos, I'd been looking for a photo Jason had taken of us at the beach. He was in the shower, and I needed the image for a class project. That's when I saw it. A folder on his phone labeled C. Just C. For Caroline. After discovering the evidence and walking out of Jason's apartment, I didn't confront either of them immediately. Instead, I watched. I observed their patterns, noted their meetings, and collected more evidence. Every video, every text, every lie carefully documented. 2 weeks later, Jason broke up with me. "It's not working," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "We want different things." I acted heartbroken, which wasn't entirely an act, but it wasn't Jason I was mourning, it was the death of my last shred of trust in my mother. 3 days after the breakup, I visited my mother's house unannounced. She wasn't home, but I still had a key. I told myself I was just picking up some childhood photos I wanted to keep. In reality, I was looking for more evidence. In her bedroom closet, behind a row of designer shoes, I found a lockbox. The combination was my birthday, the one piece of information about me she never forgot. Inside wasn't what I expected. No more sordid videos or love letters. Instead, I found a stack of envelopes, dozens of them, all addressed to me in the same handwriting. My father's handwriting, all had been opened and resealed. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, letters explaining the divorce, begging to see me, offering to pay for college, check after check made out to me for my education, all uncashed. Photos of him at my school events, standing at a distance because he wasn't allowed closer. My entire lost relationship with my father, stuffed in a box like trash. My hands shook as I read a letter dated from just after my parents' divorce. "Caroline, please, let me see Eliza. The courts granted me visitation. I've sent the child support as agreed, plus extra for her college fund. I'm begging you not to keep my daughter from me. She's all I have. Another, from when I was 15. I was at Eliza's debate championship. She was brilliant. I sat in the back so I wouldn't upset her as you suggested. Does she even know I'm trying to be in her life? Please, cash the checks I'm sending for her education at least. And the most recent, dated just a year ago. I've respected your wishes for years, Caroline, but Eliza is an adult now. I've hired an investigator to find her. This has gone on long enough. I have evidence of the financial fraud you've committed, keeping my child support while telling Eliza I abandoned her. I will go to the authorities if I have to. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd been there all along, sending money, attending my events from a distance, writing letters I never received. My mother had systematically erased him from my life while using me to extort money from him. I photographed everything, then carefully replaced the box exactly as I'd found it. That night, I did something I'd never dared before. I called the number on the most recent letter. Hello? A deep voice answered. A voice I barely remembered. Dad? My voice cracked. It's Eliza. The silence that followed was broken by a sound I never expected. My father crying. We talked for hours, about the divorce, about how my mother had convinced the courts I would be traumatized by regular contact with him, about the restraining order she'd filed using fabricated abuse allegations, about the thousands of dollars he'd sent that never reached me. I've been looking for you, he said. After you turned 18, I hired people to find you, but your mother kept moving, changing your phone numbers. She told me you didn't want me, I whispered. Eliza, you are everything to me. You still are. We arranged to meet the following week at a cafe 3 towns over, where my mother wouldn't see us. When I saw him walk in, older, grayer, but with the same kind eyes I remembered from childhood, something broke inside me. And for the first time, it wasn't breaking in a bad way. It was like a wall crumbling, letting light through. We hugged for so long, the waitress asked if we were okay. Back in my apartment, I started connecting more dots. My mother's mysterious income despite never holding a steady job, the gifts from my father that never materialized. The college fund that disappeared into my mother's face. I logged into my university's financial aid portal and requested documentation of all payments. There it was, regular deposits from my father for years, followed by a large withdrawal authorized by my mother as the custodian of the account. The next day, I received a text from my mother. Haven't heard from you since your breakup. Poor baby, come over tonight, I made your favorite dinner. I have news to share. I knew what her news would be. She was seeing Jason now. She'd frame it as, it just happened or we didn't mean to hurt you. I responded simply, can't tonight, maybe next week. I needed time to plan, time to gather more evidence. Because now I wasn't just angry about Jason, this was about decades of manipulation, lies, and theft. This was about my father, my education, my childhood dog, and every other piece of love and stability she'd stolen from me. The betrayal with my boyfriend was just the final straw, and I was about to show my mother exactly what happens when you break your daughter beyond repair. She had taught me well, after all. Too well. After meeting my father, I spiraled. Years of suppressed trauma erupted like a volcano I couldn't control. I called in sick to work for a week, barely eating, hardly sleeping. My apartment became a fortress of solitude as I processed the magnitude of my mother's betrayal. It wasn't just about Jason anymore, it was about my entire life being built on carefully constructed lies. When I finally checked my phone, there were 6 missed calls from my mother and 1 text. Jason and I have something to tell you. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. I hurled my phone against the wall, watching the screen shatter like my trust had. Then I sat on the bathroom floor and sobbed until my throat was raw. The next day, I forced myself to shower, to eat, to function. I went to the university to speak with my academic advisor about my scholarship situation. That's when I received another shock. I'm concerned about these calls we've been getting, she said, her expression sympathetic. Your mother has contacted us several times reporting that you're having mental health episodes. I froze. What? She said you've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and have stopped taking medication. She was inquiring about medical leave policies. My advisor looked uncomfortable. It's affected your fellowship renewal. The committee has concerns. The scholarship I'd worked so hard for, my ticket to independence, was in jeopardy because of more of my mother's lies. That evening, I received an email from a company where I'd interviewed for a summer internship. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue other candidates. It was the third rejection in 2 weeks. A college friend who worked at one of the firms called me. Eliza, someone called your references and said you had reliability issues due to mental health problems. They mentioned a hospital stay. Was that true? It wasn't just my education. My mother was sabotaging. It was my entire future. She was systematically ensuring I would remain dependent on her. The more independent I became, the harder she worked to pull me back into her orbit of control. I remembered my stepfather Richard, how I'd tried to tell her about his nightly visits to my room, how she'd dismissed me. The memory made me physically ill. I barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. For a moment in that bathroom staring at my reflection, I considered giving up. Maybe this was my life, always being manipulated, always being controlled. Maybe resistance was futile. Then I remembered Max, my golden retriever, how he'd look at me with complete trust, how my mother had driven him to a highway and abandoned him because he'd become inconvenient. I remembered his collar in that lockbox alongside my father's letters. A trophy of another life she'd disrupted. Something hardened inside me. I would not be another inconvenient possession discarded when I no longer served her purpose. I called Jason. He was surprised to hear from me. We need to talk, I said, forcing vulnerability into my voice. About you and my mom. We met at a neutral coffee shop. He came prepared with justifications, with lines clearly rehearsed with my mother. It just happened, Eliza. We didn't mean to hurt you. Sometimes feelings just develop. His eyes couldn't meet mine. Did she threaten you? I asked quietly. About your business, about the workers? His head snapped up, shock evident. He hadn't expected this approach. How did you? He swallowed hard. She said she'd report my undocumented workers, said she'd tell you I was just using you to get to her all along. That you'd believe her over me because, in her words, she always does. I nodded calmly, recording every word on my phone in my pocket. She blackmailed my last boyfriend too, I lied, watching his reaction carefully. And her best friend Diane helped her. They have quite the system. Jason's face paled. Diane has the videos. She keeps them as insurance. He covered his mouth too late, realizing he'd confirmed something I hadn't explicitly mentioned. I smiled sadly. I know about the videos, Jason. I saw them weeks ago on your phone. He crumbled then, confessing everything. How my mother had seduced him initially. How it became a game to her. How she'd threatened him when he wanted to end it. How her friend Diane had witnessed everything, sometimes even filming their encounters. I left that coffee shop with evidence of blackmail and confirmation about Diane's involvement, but I also left with a profound emptiness. Every relationship I'd ever trusted had been corrupted by my mother's toxicity. That night, I dreamt of Max being abandoned on that highway, confused and scared. In the dream, I was the one driving away, my mother beside me saying, "Sometimes we have to leave things behind to move forward." I woke up drenched in sweat, a revelation crystallizing. I was still that dog, loyal despite mistreatment, still hoping for love from someone incapable of providing it. That had to end. I would no longer be the abandoned pet of my mother's story. It was time to become the author instead. You're right, that flows much better for a believable timeline. Let me revise. 3 months after discovering my mother's betrayal with Jason, I was still living in the small, shabby studio apartment I had hastily rented after walking out of his place that night. The walls were thin, the plumbing unreliable, but it was mine, a space untainted by my mother's influence. I'd been meeting my father regularly, rebuilding a relationship that had been stolen from us. He offered financial help, but I refused. I needed to stand on my own. "I understand," he said, "but I've set up an account for you anyway, when you're ready." My mother's texts escalated from casual check-ins to increasingly frantic messages. "Why are you ignoring me? Jason means nothing to me, it was a mistake. I'm your mother, you don't turn your back on family." I maintained strategic, minimal contact. Enough to keep her from showing up at my door, but not enough to give her any real information about my life. One rainy Tuesday, Diane, my mother's best friend and apparent partner in manipulation, called me. "Your mother is worried sick," she said, her voice dripping with rehearsed concern. "This silent treatment is childish, Eliza." "I'm not being silent, Diane, I'm being selective about who deserves my voice." "Listen," her tone shifted, "your mother made a mistake, but she's done everything for you. Who do you think paid for that fancy education of yours?" The audacity ignited something in me. "You mean the education she sabotaged, or the one my father paid for that she stole? Which version of my life are we pretending is real today?" Silence. "Then, you don't know what you're talking about." "I know about the videos, Diane. I know you helped her blackmail Jason. I know everything." She hung up. An hour later, my mother called, hysterical. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was revealing. "Whatever you think you know is a misunderstanding. Those videos were private. Diane should never have told you about them. If you go around spreading lies, no one will believe you anyway. Remember what happened with Richard? No one believed you then either." I listened to it 5 times. She had just inadvertently admitted to knowing about my stepfather's abuse, something she'd always denied, and I had it recorded. That weekend, I took a personal day and drove to my mother's house while she was at her spa appointment. I still had her house key, and I knew her schedule hadn't changed in 20 years. Saturday mornings were sacred me time for Caroline. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I needed more concrete evidence. The lockbox had given me my father's letters, but I needed something irrefutable about her other betrayals. In her home office, behind a false panel in her desk drawer that I remembered from childhood snooping, I found her personal journal. My mother had always been vain enough to document her conquests. Reading it made me physically ill, but I forced myself to continue. Entry after entry detailed her manipulations, not just of me and Jason, but of my father, previous boyfriends, even family members. She wrote about intercepting my father's checks and using them for cosmetic procedures, about suspecting Richard was too interested in me, but ignoring it because he paid the bills, about deliberately sabotaging my job opportunities so I would need her more. The most damning entry was from just after I'd discovered the affair with Jason. "Eliza found out about Jay today. She's always been so gullible, thinking she's special to these men. They always choose me in the end. Dee has the videos secured as insurance. If Eliza makes trouble, we have options. I've already called her university about her mental health episodes. That should keep her scholarship in jeopardy enough that she'll come back when she runs out of money. She always does." I photographed every page, hands steady despite the rage building inside me. This wasn't just opportunistic betrayal, this was calculated, long-term psychological warfare against her own daughter. As I was replacing the journal, my phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Your mother knows you're in her house. We have cameras. Get out, or we call the police." I looked up at the corner of the office. There it was. A small camera I hadn't noticed. I smiled directly into it, held up the journal so they could see exactly what I'd found, and calmly walked out the front door. In my car, another text came through. "Whatever you're planning, don't. We have more evidence against you than you could imagine." They thought they were threatening me. In reality, they had just confirmed they were both involved and worried enough to try intimidation. I finally had everything I needed. The hunter had become the hunted. and I was about to set the perfect trap. 2 months after finding my mother's journal, I received the text I'd been waiting for. Mother's Day is next Sunday, family brunch at Diane's. I know we've had issues, but I'm still your mother. Please come. Perfect timing. My plan required a special occasion, an audience, and my mother's desperation to maintain appearances. I replied after a calculated delay. I'll be there, maybe it's time we talked. Her response was immediate. Oh sweetheart, I'm so happy, I've missed you. I'd spent the past 8 weeks meticulously preparing. First, I contacted my father. I'm confronting her, I explained. About everything. His concern was evident. Eliza, your mother is manipulative. She'll twist this. Not this time, I assured him, but I need you there. Next, I reached out to key family members. My mother's sister Emma, who'd always been suspicious of her. My grandfather, who controlled the family trust. My cousin, who'd been another victim of my mother's manipulations. I contacted former friends my mother had alienated, former boyfriends she'd tried to seduce. I was selective, choosing only those with direct experience of her betrayals. I'm finally addressing what Caroline did, I told each of them. If you want to witness it, be at Diane's house for Mother's Day brunch. Many were hesitant, but curiosity is a powerful motivator. Especially when I hinted at evidence they'd want to see. 3 days before the brunch, I made a strategic appearance at my mother's house. I've missed you, she cooed, hugging me too tightly. Let's put all this ugliness behind us. I nodded, eyes down, playing the dutiful daughter. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about forgiveness. Her eyes gleamed with victory. She thought she'd won. I've been making a video, I said casually, about you. For Mother's Day. A video? Her vanity was instantly intrigued. A tribute to everything you've done for me, I said, my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. I want to show it at the brunch. She practically glowed with narcissistic anticipation. What a wonderful idea. Diane has a projector set up for her business presentations. Before leaving, I placed 3 small, undetectable cameras in her house, one in her bedroom, one in the living room, and one in her office. The next 48 hours would provide the final pieces of my documentary. Sure enough, that evening my mother called Diane. Eliza's making a tribute video, she gloated, the camera capturing her smug expression. She's finally coming around. I told you she always does. Diane laughed. Should we be worried about what's in it? Please. She has nothing concrete. Besides, she's weak, just like her father, always needing mommy's approval. They spent the next hour strategizing how to leverage my return to their social circle, discussing which parts of my life they could control next, every word captured in perfect clarity. The morning of Mother's Day, I dressed carefully, conservative but elegant. I carried a small gift bag and a USB drive containing my tribute. My father met me a block away from Diane's house. Are you sure about this? He asked, his face lined with concern. I showed him a 2-minute preview of what I'd compiled. His expression hardened from worry to resolve. I'll be right behind you, he said. Diane's house was already full when I arrived. My strategic invitations had worked. The audience I'd selected was there, mingling awkwardly with my mother's usual sycophants. My mother rushed to embrace me, her smile too wide, her eyes calculating. Everyone, she announced. My daughter has prepared a special Mother's Day tribute video. Isn't that sweet? The room murmured appreciatively. Diane set up the projector while my mother preened, clearly expecting fawning admiration. Before we start, I said, voice clear and carrying, I want to thank everyone for coming, especially those who traveled far to be here. This video contains the unfiltered truth about my relationship with my mother. Some of it will be difficult to watch. My mother's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained composure, likely assuming I was being dramatic. I pressed play. The video began with childhood photos set to gentle music. My mother relaxed visibly. Then came the evidence, methodically presented, clearly labeled undeniable. The diary entries about stealing my college fund, the recorded phone calls about sabotaging my scholarship, The videos of her and Jason, her recent conversations with Diane plotting to regain control of my life. The medical records showing she'd forged prescriptions for mental health medications I'd never taken. The letters from my father she'd hidden. The checks she'd stolen. Her confession about knowing Richard was molesting me. And finally, the recorded admission about abandoning Max on the highway, laughing as she told Diane how she'd left him confused and crying in the dark. 22 minutes of irrefutable evidence displayed before everyone she'd ever tried to impress. The room was dead silent when it ended. My mother stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade shattered. That's all taken out of context, she stammered. Eliza has mental problems. She's been diagnosed with... With what, Mom? I interrupted calmly. The conditions you invented to control me? To steal my money? To keep me from Dad? My father stepped forward then, the final piece of my plan. Hello, Caroline, he said quietly. It's been a long time. My mother's face drained of color at the sight of my father. She hadn't seen him in person since the divorce, hadn't needed to, with her lawyers doing the dirty work. David, she whispered. What are you doing here? Supporting our daughter, he said simply. Something I should have been allowed to do for the past 20 years. The room erupted into chaos. Diane lunged for the projector, but my cousin, who'd lost her inheritance to my mother's manipulations, blocked her path. My grandfather, stern and silent until now, stood up. Is this true, Caroline? He demanded, pointing at the screen where evidence of her financial fraud still glowed. You stole from your own daughter? It wasn't stealing, my mother hissed, her composure cracking. I'm her mother. What's hers is mine. Her sister Emma stepped forward. And Richard, you knew what he was doing to Eliza? My mother's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies and finding none. Her carefully cultivated social circle was witnessing her unraveling in real time. Eliza is disturbed, she tried again, louder now. She's always made up stories for attention. Remember when she claimed her dog ran away? She let him out herself. The room fell silent. I played the final recording, her laughing with Diane about abandoning Max on the highway, how he'd tried to follow the car, how she'd accelerated to lose him. My grandfather walked slowly to my mother's side. He'd given her Max as a gift for me when I was 6. You're out of the will, he said quietly, and the trust, effective immediately. My mother lunged for me then, mask completely gone. You ungrateful little bitch, after everything I've done for you. My father stepped between us, protective even after all these years. The police have copies of everything, I said calmly. The financial fraud, the false medical records, the interference with my education. If you come near me again, I'll file charges. You can't prove anything, she shrieked. I already have, I replied. But, thank you for the additional confession in front of witnesses. The room had become a tribunal, with family members and former friends confronting her with their own stories, patterns of manipulation I hadn't even known about. Years of carefully hidden behavior exposed to harsh light. I watched her transformation with clinical detachment. The beautiful, poised woman became a snarling, desperate creature, hurling accusations and threats. Her makeup smeared from angry tears, her designer dress rumpled as she gesticulated wildly. You're nothing without me, she screamed as I turned to leave. Nothing. Who do you think made you who you are? I paused at the door and looked back one last time. You're right about that, Mom. You did make me who I am. You taught me how to recognize lies, how to gather evidence, and how to wait for the perfect moment. You taught me exactly how to destroy someone. I smiled at her, calm and collected while she fell apart. You chose your desires over your daughter. Now you have neither. I walked out with my father beside me, leaving behind the wreckage of my mother's carefully constructed life. The last sound I heard was her wail of rage, the death cry of a narcissist exposed. That was 2 years ago. My mother still texts occasionally, usually when she's desperate or drunk. I never respond. I've heard she lost her house. The family trust covered the mortgage. Diane cut ties with her when some of the videos became evidence in a blackmail investigation. Last I heard, my mother was living in a small apartment, complaining to anyone who will listen about her mentally ill daughter who turned everyone against her. Few listen anymore. I moved across the country, started therapy, and rebuilt my life. My father helped me re-enroll in college. I'll graduate with honors next spring. We have Sunday dinners weekly, making up for lost time. Sometimes I still dream about Max, abandoned on that dark highway. I volunteer at a rescue shelter now, helping dogs find homes with people who deserve their loyalty. The scholarship I created with my grandfather's help, for survivors of parental abuse, just funded its 5th student. Healing isn't linear. Some days the memories ambush me without warning. But I'm no longer that confused girl who thought love meant accepting betrayal. Some people never change, but you can change how they affect you. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real stories of recovery and justice. Your support helps me share these difficult truths and reminds others they're not alone.